of the hour, and I think we're going to get started. So thank you very much for joining us. This particular webinar, we're going to have Nick Carbone talking to us about thinking about student reading. As the screen says, we have muted everybody. Not that we don't want to hear from you, but with too many people on the call, it gets confusing to try to let everybody talk at once. So if you have questions, you can simply input them over to the right. You can put them in the chat box, or you can put them in the Q&A area, and I'll monitor both of those. If questions come up in the middle of the presentation that seem timely, I will interrupt Nick. I have his permission to do so, and we'll ask the question. Otherwise, we will save the questions for the end. And with that, we have Nick Carbone. Nick has been working at Bedford St. Martin's for going on 10 years, but is also a teacher and, in his phrasing, itinerant scholar, although I will tell you he does have a house and does not move around within his house. He definitely knows the classroom, he knows instructors, he talks to tons and tons of faculty constantly and is one himself. So he's speaking to you with lots of experience here. And with that, I would like to pass the ball to Nick to talk about thinking about student reading.
Thank you, Becky, and thanks everybody for joining. I do want to reiterate, if you have a question, if I go too fast or I click something and you get a little bit lost, let Becky know and we can slow it down or cover something. To start, I'm going to do a couple of things. With the WebEx, I'm going to share my desktop, and I have 3 different browsers open. One will be inside the LaunchPad product that will show ways to use writing to think about student reading. The other is a blog site that I've posted in the chat. I'm going to just paste that URL in again in case you want to follow it along. We'll start with the blog just because it gives an overview. And then I have a 3rd browser open, which I may not need, but it's just in case somebody wants to see a student view of the work that we'll be looking at. So with that, just bear with me while my screen goes green and yours does for a second. I'm going to share desktop. And you see that I'm at the blog. This is in Blogger. One thing I want to point out, if you're not familiar with this blog interface, if you mouse over to the right, there's a little bit of resource and references, including links back into the EdTech Week, the book we're looking at in particular, and other LaunchPads. So I want to start humbly by saying you probably won't learn anything from me that you don't already know. But what I'm trying to do is to bring 2 ideas together to show how these 2 ideas are radicalized by digital technologies. The first thing, many of us know as teachers, as people who run teaching and learning centers, is that when people, students especially, are learning how to read, one of the struggles is getting them to annotate and to slow down and to read more deeply. So there's this idea, and if you search writing by reading, you'll find lots of good websites, probably some from schools you're at, that talk to students about the importance of reading slowly, taking annotations. This example from North Central University lists things that you're probably familiar with and that are true. They're addressing a writer, but what they say is also true for a reader. It helps you to stay focused and engaged, which is very important. It improves comprehension. If you're going to do research, it's good for bibliographies. It helps you find ideas. But annotating as you read does a lot to get students to sort of read more deeply and understand what's being taught beyond the things they can do when they skim or just cram for a quiz. So it slows students down and it engages them. The trend we're seeing in education in a lot of places is combining reading and writing courses. And in those courses, there's a strong emphasis, too, on the role of annotation. So in teaching students to read and teaching them the reading strategies they need to be successful readers, whether this is, my wife's a 4th grade teacher and she does this all the way through college. You talk to students about reading actively rather than passively, and one of the key ways of reading actively is through annotation. The other key way is through discussion. So we ask students to read something, we bring them to class, we have discussions. Or if you're in a book club, you read something with friends and you meet at somebody's house and you discuss it. Or if you're writing a scholarly article, you read something and the discussion you have is the article that you're publishing. So the role of reading and discussion is essential. Digital technologies allow the annotation and the discussion to take place around the thing being read. That's the big change with these technologies. And that change has powerful potential in the classroom. And we're going to look at that in a bit. But I just want to point out one more thing that you all know to be true, that our students are used to these ideas. They post on Facebook walls where they're sharing thoughts with other people's around, friends. If they've been to blogs like Medium, which is a blog that was just developed a few years ago, it supports annotations in the margins of the blog post instead of comments going at the end, and there's a significant difference there in what that means. It's also possible to annotate sound and video, and of course the old standby discussion boards at the end of articles or journal articles, whether they be newspaper or print. All of these things that students do, though, they tend to do socially rather than academically. So we talk about students being digital natives, but they're really social digital natives, not academic digital natives. They come into our courses, and one of the things we have to do is take the skills they have with social networking and shared comments and those kinds of things, and teach them to use them as academics. So with that in mind, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go to my other browser, Firefox, and I'm going to be inside a textbook inside of LaunchPad. LaunchPad is the name of a platform that we publish books on across the disciplines. So whether you're here as a biologist, chemist, economics professor, communication, there's somebody from statistics, there's people from learning centers, there's people from the humanities. No matter what you publish, what you're seeing in this tool is available in all the disciplines that Macmillan Higher Education publishes in. I chose history not because I'm a history teacher, but because it's one of the first books we have in the Bedford St. Martin side of the list out. And this particular book I actually like. It's an interesting book, and I like the approach as a teacher, so I wanted to work with this book. What you see on the screen, I'm just going to do one thing really quick. What you see on the screen is the interface after I've logged in as an instructor. So as an instructor, I'm in the LaunchPad setting. You can see the title of the book here. I can navigate to other courses here. What you get with this book is the book content organized by chapter. If I turn on ebook, it would turn off these features here for assignments and other things. But the book is wrapped inside a system, the LaunchPad system, that helps you use other tools with the book. So there's resources that are distributed through the chapter are sorted and filtered here. There's a grade book. You can set up rosters and groups. So if you're teaching a large lecture class and you want to set up discussion groups for the TA, you can do that. And other things that resemble what you see in a course management system, only this is built around a book. So what I've done is I've created an assignment. So you see that there's 4 assignments due in the next day, and they're built around the prologue to the book. And what I'm imagining as I was setting this up is that we're at the beginning of a course, and for me the beginning of the course is a magical time because I can set the tone and tenor of what I want to do. I know that students, when they come in at the beginning, don't know quite what to expect. They're nervous sometimes. And so it's a time where I can get a lot established about course routines, what's important, why we're going to do things, and how we're going to do things. And the other thing for me in the beginning is I don't like to do anything high stakes until add drop is over. There's nothing more frustrating for me as a teacher than to invest in a high stakes assignment and then lose students or get students at the end of add drop period. So I like to start in slow and easy, and I also like to go slow with reading especially, because my research tells me that students are used to skimming, they're used to moving fast, they're used to multitasking, which is just another way of saying doing lots of little things one at a time. So that attention, that leisure for slow reading, for study, I like to build it into the course to slow them down and let them start living a life of the mind in the scope of the course and not feeling rushed, especially if they're full-time students working jobs, commuting, and living full adult lives. So the time I carve out for them is precious. And so this opens with that belief. So let me click here. And I'm clicking into a section of the book. This is an entire section. It's the prologue. You'll notice a couple of things. One is I've written an introduction to the section. So this is my text. And when I teach, whether I'm teaching face-to-face or online, I do spend a lot of time with these introductions, especially early on, directing students both to what I want them to do in the unit. And here we're talking about discussion and annotation prompts that they'll see in the pages. But I also talk a lot about why we're doing this and how it's going to build and apply to other things in the course. I find that with meta direction and meta purpose, students buy into the pedagogy a lot more fully. And so you're seeing some of that here. So let me scroll down a bit. The other thing you'll see is this is from the ebook. So anything that says ebook is items that came with the book. Where you see something like this that doesn't say ebook, I've added. So I added this section from Plato, and I've added this, a discussion board. The other thing I did in this unit was to scaffold time and to help students work through it. I staggered some due dates to make sure that they get in, they don't procrastinate, and they stay on track. This is modeling an introductory course, so I'm assuming a student who's a first or second year student, and assuming a student who might need some guidance and help on developing good habits. So I take the time to do that. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to look at these units in roughly the order you see them here. And what you're going to see when I go in is the use of a combination of annotation tools and discussion tools. And I want to draw your attention as we look to the kinds of things I'm trying to accomplish with those tools, because I think those tools are really dynamic in the context of a course. So let me start here with the first unit. You'll notice overall that this unit moves from the history of the universe to telling students what world history is to key ideas that they're going to study in the text. It's setting up the purpose of the book, and that's why it's called the prologue. So let me open this. Those little squares always remind me of Rubik's Cubes, and I like them because they're all gray and I can always win it. So now I'm in the book. It's called The History of the Universe. And what you can see here is that I inserted a note at the top of the page. This is telling me that there's one note. Inserting notes is very easy. You just highlight some text, and then you click Add Note. If you want to highlight the text as well, you can do that. But I put a note here, and the note is my way of directing the kinds of annotations I want students to make as they read. So one of the things I like most about the interface is I can establish a note and direct ways I want students to read for different reasons at different times in the course. This is a course where we're just starting, and the note I have here is that before you even begin reading, based on just this title, what do you anticipate the book is going to be about? And that's a classic reading strategy that students are taught. How do you look at a text and predict and anticipate where it's going to take you? The other reason for asking this we'll get to later as we work through the unit. But what you'll notice is that students have come in and they've written responses. So I'm going to expand this. And you'll see that what the book allows is students to come in and to reply to the note in different ways. So I can reply to this thread. So as an instructor, in this case, I might come back and say, I like thinking you're all pushing so far. James, what did you think of your... And I'm calling out James because you'll notice that James was pretty brief. In matter of fact, he didn't say much at all. But what I'm getting with this is a sense of who the students are, an opportunity for students to see one another and to share their thoughts as they read so they're not reading alone. When I worked in the Writing Center and Learning Center years ago, one of the things that always struck me was students coming in and they were studying alone or writing alone, and they were struggling, and they thought that they were the only ones struggling. And so what I like about an interface like this is students can begin to see from classmates how other people are reading and engaging the content. They can learn from people who are, writing fuller comments. So James wrote a pretty short and not really on-point comment. He didn't really engage, but he can see examples from Kevin and Stacy, and Stacy addressed Kevin, ways to think about the text more richly. And so I'm comfortable going in and asking James, to come back and give this more thought. And that interface allows somebody like James, who might be a weaker reader, to learn from stronger readers, while at the same time they're reading as they write and they're writing as they read. When I go on and I move students from this to discussions and to research paper, the nice thing to it for me as an instructor is if I start assignments that are going to be written in the book this way, if I start with their initial thoughts, their impressions, their annotations, and move them or ask them to move from that to eventually essays, it mitigates against things like plagiarism and other issues, because you can see the origins of student thinking, and you can track where they might have gone off and accidentally misused a source because they lost track of their own thinking. So that's that. Let me show you one other thing. I'm going to click the Home button, and I want to show you another example of a similar idea. This is the history of the planet. You can see where the book is narrowing down. This is due a couple of days later. It'll take a brief second to load. Now, the other note that we have is a top note. And a top note is a note that just sits on the top of the page. And this is useful for a variety of reasons. In this particular case, I wanted the writing prompt and the discussion just to have a wider field. I'm imagining that something might be a little bit longer, a little bit more in depth. And in this case, the question I'm asking, by the way, is, there's an article, there's a paragraph at the end I draw their attention to. I've highlighted the beginning of it so they can find it more easily. And I'm asking them these kinds of questions based on what they've read so far in these few pages. What do you see as our role in the planet as a species? Why are we on this rock? Why are we in this universe? And why does our history matter in a space so large and infinite? That's a very broad philosophical question. It's one that invites longer consideration than an annotation. So I set up the annotation in the tool to allow for that. But it's the kind of question I ask in this kind of a course, and I recommend asking whether you're teaching biology, chemistry, any course. What is going to make the student connect and become interested in the course and is going to touch them as a thinker and a person? As academics, when we get invested in our disciplines, they become part of our identity, and we relate to the field and our thinking by who we are over our careers. How do we start students on that journey? The issue here also goes to motivation in the course. Extrinsic motivation, a lot of you know, comes from things outside the student's own self-interest. They're compelled to get a good grade to stay on a football team. They want to do well in the course because their parents are sacrificing. They want to do well because they need a job. Those are all extrinsic motivations. So this is trying to get at an intrinsic motivation to help students start thinking about how the content of the course relates to them as an individual, as people, as members of a community. So I'm using a different kind of question to get at a different kind of learning, and I'm going to be relying on them sharing back and forth to enhance that experience. Now, right now, there's no replies here, but students would be able to come in to reply. Let me show you another thing, going back to the list. This is an example, simply wanted to point it out, I won't spend a lot of time here, of a feature of the book that I like. What I did was I searched the web, and I found this from the Phaedrus. It's one of my favorite pieces from Plato, where Socrates is warning against writing, saying writing will weaken memory. And I used a tool in the book that lets me add an HTML page. You note that I was able to put the page where I wanted in the table of contents. So if I use previous to next, I would be able to navigate the book. So it's as if the page is in the book. And what I like about it is the same tools for using annotations that come from the book are available in the materials that I add. So very frequently I'll add into the books I'm using my own assignments, my lecture notes if I'm lecturing, articles I've read, things I've found that I want to augment the text with. And I really like that the students can use the same tools to read the things I add as they can to read and interact with the things that the publisher provides. And again, this is one of my favorite passages. So I try to use this in every course I teach. Let me go home one more time and show you just one more tool. The other tool that this comes with is a discussion board. And the difference between when I might use the notes and the board is on focus. So these ideas where I had notes on these particular pages were asking students to focus on things that were kicked off by those pages. The discussion board is asking them to reflect on the entire unit, so it's just a bigger space and a bigger tool. And so it's a traditional discussion board. You set up directions, and again, if you're seeing the screen while we wait for the board tools to load, you'll see again, I'm telling my students that we're going to be doing these summary boards on a regular basis, and why we're doing summaries and how it matters is included in the directions. The other thing I want to point out that I hope you'll find useful if you do discussions online is this little trick that I like to use. You notice I have my own typos here, but it says after you post, respond to the summaries of others, choosing first a classmate with no responses and then a classmate with only one response. That's my go-to instruction for kickstarting discussions. It generally assures almost always that everybody in the class gets at least one response from a classmate. And it makes sure that they're reading one another, and it allows the discussion to sort of take place. The discussion board is threaded. I can grade them from here if I want to. I've set this up to be graded manually. So Anne has come in and she's written a summary of the prologue. She's made a note about what the book is doing, why the prologue is the way it is, the goals in getting students to think in the way the book is asking them to think. And she's making an argument that other students are making, that the author does this moving from the vastness of the universe to the single globe to emphasize that we're all part of one planet and global community. And Anne says, I know that's the point, but not all countries are equal, so if this is one world, a country like the U.S. has more responsibilities and powers. So she's drawing a contrast with the theme of the book. Michael posted, and then Michael came back and commented on what Anne said, agreeing with a lot of it, but noticing that he didn't think about the idea that she did, and that's and thinking about what she said, he's saying, maybe what she's talking about fits into the prologue, because the prologue talked about the book is going to use comparison, change, and connection as a way to talk about how nations interact and how you as a historian, work with them. And then Michael says, oh, maybe there should be a fourth C, conflict. And then he wonders why conflict wasn't called out. And so what you're seeing with this is students summarizing, sharing things, and pushing their thinking in different directions because the tools allow it. There's one final thing I want to show you about this that's pretty useful. You'll notice that this section is grayed out, second thoughts. What I did was I clicked on that unit and I made it unavailable to students. And the reason I did in this particular example, and the reason I like this book, by the way, is the second thoughts questions were the same kinds of questions I was embedding inside the annotations and notes I was making. So how do modern notions of the immense size and age of the universe affect your understanding of human history gets at the same kinds of things I was getting at. What our book authors have done with their editors is put these questions in the book, and you'll find these kinds of questions across all the books and all the disciplines, but they're designed for single students. But what you can do as an instructor, if you like these questions, is either borrow from them and reposition them in notes if you want to switch so that students are sharing their thoughts with one another. Another strategy for something like this is to invite students to answer these questions, and then after they answer them, to look back over their answers and report them in a discussion board where they've got the private time to use the question, and then the discussion is sort of a public discussion. But I turn that off, and what I will do really quickly is I'm going to go to the student view. It's shared, and I just want to show you that when something is turned off like that, the student doesn't even see it as gray. So when the student comes in, they see the same layout, but they won't see the thing that's grayed out. And that'll load in a second. That's the gist of things. The thing I want to emphasize is that what you do pedagogically with a tool like this is open. You have these tools, and what you can do is based on your imagination and your sense of experimentation as a teacher. The underlying premise for me of teaching is that a syllabus and a course and a curriculum is a learning hypothesis. It's an experiment. And when you're in and you're experimenting with tools, as you learn how to play with them, as you explore and you discover, you're running experiments on learning. And over the course of 2, 3, 4 semesters with an approach and product, it refines and gets stronger. And you get better at it, and it becomes more fun. So I really hope that when this is done, you get a chance to experiment with this kind of approach, if not in this particular product, which you're welcome to do, in spaces like this where you can see students talking around a text together, learning from one another how to read, and exploring their own thoughts and feelings so that they're not alone, they're not distressed, and they're part of the learning community you're trying to establish. And again, you see that those questions are missing. I want to wrap that up and move to questions because I imagine there's one or two. Thank you for listening to this part, and I'll keep the screen on, and we can go to the chat, or you can ask Becky the question, and she'll forward it on.
Okay, so questions over in the chat or in the Q&A. We do have a couple here to get started. Would you do this extensive focus on reading throughout the course, or just at the beginning of the course?
I would start doing it differently as the course goes on. For me, I think it's worth getting students into the habit of annotating and insisting on it. I might not embed as many as you see here. My hope is that students would start annotating on their own. And the goal in the course would be that I would ease up on the amount I assign, but that they would keep doing it because they find it useful. One of the things that's important for me is that students gravitate towards a good habit and make it their own, internalize it. But there might be a section later on where I add materials. In a course like this, where you can upload a whole bunch of documents and the book has documents, they might do a research paper that spins out of that. And when we get to that section, I might require more than less. But the goal would be for them to eventually be doing this more on their own. But I would probably still have a summary discussion for every major unit. Because I think the summary is really an important thing for helping them to get past skimming and getting past the kind of recall stuff you get with quizzes. I really want them to dig down and do some writing on summaries. So there will always be a summary.
How do you find this changes your in-class time with the students?
It depends how I'm teaching the course. Usually I'm teaching a writing course, and when I find this is useful is I can come into class and hit the ground running with a conversation. One of the things I do, no matter what I'm teaching, and sometimes I teach a content course, a lit course, is whatever we do in a space like this, I open the class with a cross-reference to it. So I might call on somebody to elucidate or add to something that they've said in this space. Or if we're going to do something in small groups, I might skim through these kinds of comments and decide how I'm going to group students based on things that they have in common, or maybe based on differences. I think it's really important to go back and forth so that they don't see this as busy work and that this is related back into the course. For a lot of teachers, I know this is sort of the beginning of a flipped classroom. So if you're teaching a content course, you might have students come in, do these kinds of reading and writing activities along with, the chapter quizzes and other things. That establishes in your mind what students know. And then you might say, I was reading your annotations and you were all fell into this conversation, but I want to point out something you missed that's important here. And you direct your classroom time to things that you think might be worth correcting, amending, or emphasizing based on what you're seeing.
How do you gauge the reading annotation or the ability of reading critically? Do you review the comments? What do you do there?
There's a couple of tools in the book that I'm experimenting with. You notice the discussion board had a grade comment. I try to do two things. One is I design these so that if they're going to be graded, I don't have to read hard. I'm not reading these the way I would an article or an essay where I'm commenting on drafts. I'm really reading quickly, almost skimming, just to make sure students are working diligently at what I'm asking them to do. I don't care if they're doing it well as long as they're doing it diligently. So in that first page where we saw the student with a very short comment, if I was grading, I would not give that student points because he didn't get into the spirit and the need of it. But the other kids I would just all give 100s to or full credit, and I wouldn't have to read closely. So it doesn't take a lot of time. The other tool in this space is the ability to give students credit on submission. So the grade book would automatically give them credit, and rather than me manually scoring 15 or 20 students, what I would do instead is just remove credit from students who didn't do adequate. The assumption I have always with students, and this is generally true, is that if you give them work that they can do this isn't asking for right or wrong answers. This isn't asking them to make hard choices. It's asking them to read and respond. They can do it pretty well, and that builds muscles in their reading muscles. It builds writing muscles. It builds fluidity that will help them in the course as the content gets more intense. And so I've designed this for my own sake where I don't spend a lot of time grading at all.
Do you provide an academic reading method or some techniques to start out the course?
It depends on the class. If I see students struggling and I feel like they need it, what I will do is first look at what's on my local campus. I'm a great believer in using my local writing center and learning center and the materials they provide. Sometimes the library will have things on critical reading. There'll be the learning center will have things on annotating and note-taking. and I will point students to that. I won't necessarily take time out of my teaching to teach that, but I'll trust that students will go get those resources, and just through practice and just through doing it again and again, we'll get better at it over time. But if they don't, if students are really struggling, then I'll get a little bit more proactive and recommend the visit to those centers. My job is still in the content areas is content, but what I find is that when students are doing these kind of things, they become better students in my class. So I will support them without changing my main focus.
Regarding the interface, I think this is referring to the interface of LaunchPad. How much customization is allowed by the editor? I'm assuming that means you in this situation.
So let me go back to the instructor view with my other browser. And I'm clicking home. And Dimitri, the tool I use to add things is here. So I'm clicking, and I'm going to click Create New, and you're going to see a menu. So these are the things I can add. Folders to organize content. You've seen a discussion board. The document collection lets you, if you've got a collection of things that you're using, so if you have a case study or a collection of op-eds, or if you're a biologist, and one of my favorite jobs was at Marlborough College, and I was teaching a junior writing course, and we had students from across the disciplines had to write an op-ed piece, and so we used a book called Headline News Science Views, which was pieces by scientists writing op-eds, and it was about being a public intellectual. So if I had a collection of those, I might upload those. You can insert links to other websites. The HTML page is a standard editor. An offline assignment is something that you might ask students to do. So you might ask students in a math course to go out and measure and take the measurements of an arch on campus, come back and report in class how they did that, or design something that relies on math. Offline assignments are good for that. And that just allows you to use the gradebook for things that aren't caught here, and link collections for an annotated link and so on. You can create your own quizzes to augment what we have. So it's pretty simple. If you choose something like an HTML page, it's a standard editor with a place for a subject line, a place for a subtitle, and then a basic WYSIWYG editor. So it is pretty easy. And as you saw from the Plato piece, I'm just going to stop this. It goes into the book co-equivalent to the TOC. It's the same font, same treatment, and so it integrates smoothly. It looks really nice.
I think those are all of the questions we have at this point. I will give folks another minute or two to type in if they have any other questions. But in the meantime, Nick, I wanted to thank you for doing this. I found this particularly informative and interesting, and I feel like we should be all doing more with the tools available to us, because some of this stuff actually seems fairly easy to integrate. So,
thanks you. I'll hang on if there's any questions, but I know if there isn't, I encourage you to again visit the blog. You're welcome if you want to use that to post questions afterwards. What I will do is go back over this transcript and take the questions that we got and just write up some notes and put them on the blog. So I'll expand what's on the blog to cover some of the questions we got today. And there you see our basic HTML page editing interface. But if there's no other questions, thank you, everybody. I really appreciate you taking your time out. And I hope the day you have weather-wise is as blue and warm as Boston is for us today. It's ideal.
That's just taunting.
Yes, it is. After the feet of snow we've got, it feels good to taunt.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.